Hey there guys, this is Victor with VictorVectorJKU. Today we're in the garage and I'm going to be going over the lighting package that I picked out for Project Vector. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so there's a lot of aftermarket companies that provide lighting for the off-road community, and there's so many options to go with and different types of lights to basically throw onto your vehicle. Different styles from rounds to cube lights to light bars, and there's pros and cons to all of those. But today I'm going to be going over what I chose to throw on Project Vector. I decided to go with Hilites because one, they've been around for a long time with their original daylighters. And honestly, I also found them to be probably one of the most cost-effective brands to go with. Now, I'm sure people are going to argue with that a little bit, but where I was able to find the products, the sales that I was able to locate, as well as having discount codes on different retailer sites, that's what I ended up deciding to go with. Alright, so before we talk about any of the specific sets of lights that I picked up, let's go ahead and talk about the coating that I put on the front. So you can see that all of my lights have this sort of yellow amber coating. Basically what I did was I wanted to have sort of an amber colored light, but I didn't want to go with something too orange. So I found this, just a cheap film on Amazon. I'll go and throw a link to that in the video description below. And in this way, it's just not quite as intense as the white light would be. And it kind of cuts through fog and different elements like rain and snow a little bit better. It doesn't wash out quite as much or create as much reflection back at the driver. I like that color tone quite a bit. That's on all the KC Hilites that I have, along with my fog lights in the front bumper. So let's go ahead and talk about each of the lights that I decided to pick out for Vector then. So I'm running two KC Hilites Slimlites up on the A-pillars, along with two on the front bumper. Reason for these is to get me distance forward lighting. So if I'm cruising down a road, I have a lot of good lighting. I can see things ahead of me in a great distance. And they are in a spot pattern, they're not a flood pattern. What I'll do is I'll actually run those in tandem with my fog lights. And I found that that works pretty good. The fog lights give me a little bit more close range, and the KC Slimlites will give me a good dispersion forward with the four that I have mounted. So basically what I have are the two on the bumper that basically go just straight forward. And then the two on the A-pillar kick out just a little bit to catch a little bit more of the ditch down the road, maybe about like 50-100 yards. And so those guys have been working out pretty good for me. Now, however, I am thinking that when I do get around to making my new front bumper, I'm going to take two lights up on the A-pillar. I'm going to move them down to the bumper because there is a little bit of washout that happens with the hood, as well as if there's any elements like rain or snow, I get a lot of reflection off of those elements. And so I'm not really a huge fan of that, so I'm thinking I'm probably going to drop them down to the bumper. Alright, then the next thing is going to be my KC C2's. So I have two mounted on the A-pillars in the front. These are both mounted facing kind of forward to catch the ditch immediately right at the tire. And then I also have two back here mounted on the rear bumper that are pointed directly out, and that catches the rear corner ditch. So when I'm backing up or keeping an eye as I'm coming around a tree obstacle or something, that light will help me light it up, and I'll be able to keep a good eye on what I'm passing and not have to worry about, say, clipping my rear end or the hardtop. These lights actually have probably been my favorite lights to have installed and best locations. These guys just put a really good array of light out around the vehicle, sort of a perimeter lighting, which I don't think a lot of people think about too much. A lot of people think forward lighting, reverse lights, and then rock lights. And this is one area that I think a lot of people kind of overlook in off-roading, especially if you're in any tight tree areas or any kind of either dim areas, or you do any night wheeling in trails. If you're just going through trails, then these have honestly been probably one of the best upgrades that I gotta say in the way of lighting that I have chosen. Now, I do have plans to get 4 more of these installed. I'm gonna put 2 in the front bumper to replace my fog lights, and then I'm gonna get 2 on the rear bumper, and those are gonna be just auxiliary lights. So I'm gonna have that all hooked up on the same switch for my perimeter lighting. That way, when I hit those on, driving down the trail, I have lighting all the way around 360 perimeter. And I think that's pretty cool, and I'm excited for when that comes around, but I haven't gotten there yet. Alright, and then the last thing are going to be my 9 KC Cyclones that I have mounted for my rock lights. Now these guys, what I did was I made my own harness, which Typically what I do is make my own harness. In the subsequent video to this one, I'm going to actually show you guys a little bit of detail on how I go about building my harness. So when that video comes out, I'll have a link to that video in the video description below. So what did I decide to go with here? So I did 9 lights. What I did was I actually broke it up into 2 harnesses. I have one harness that's running from my VO switch underneath the hood that runs the front 3. And then I have a second harness that actually runs from the VO switch down the front wall and then along the chassis, along the back, and that's going to feed the 6 other lights, so 3 in the middle and 3 in the back. And I went with the 9 Cyclones because I wanted to make sure that I had really adequate lighting underneath. So if I'm ever doing any rock crawling or anything at night, there is a good amount of light and I'm not going to have any dark or dim spots while I am crawling over the rocks, so my spotter is able to see anything that could potentially hit. So I think that this pattern is actually working out really killer. So basically what I have is I'll have one on both sides underneath the fender flare. Then I have one mounted underneath the center. I have 2 on either side. One right up here as well underneath the center. And then I have 2 more in the back of the wheel well here, as well as my final one right here underneath the storage compartment in the tub. So with that, it makes it so I only have like one area that's kind of dimly lit, which is basically right underneath the engine and transmission. And that's mainly because my skid plates, I don't have a good place I could put a light there that would be able to get adequate lighting without being in harm's way. Everything else is tucked up nice and high above the frame rails or whatever obstacle could potentially hit it. Alright, so then the last light to mention is going to be my engine compartment light that I mounted to the bottom of the hood. So this one here I did just keep as a normal white diffused pattern for the KC Cyclone. I decided to do this way because I don't want to have any discoloration in the engine bay. So if I actually have to look at something, I need to look and identify a color. I'm not struggling because the light is a yellow amber. So I decided to just stick with white there, and it does a very good job lighting the engine bay. Alright, so now that I got the hood open, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the routing paths that I chose for the harnesses that I built, as well as the harnesses that were supplied. So the KC Slimlites, the kit that I got, did come with the harness, whereas the KC C2's, along with the KC Cyclones, I made my own harness for those because I wanted to be very specific in location. I didn't want to have a lot of extra harness laying around. So if you guys have been around the channel since I started it, you would know that my first video was when I installed the VO switch. This is what I'm using to run all of my lighting along with my lockers. So what's cool about this is this box holds all the solenoids along with the fuses, so you just have a little programmable switch that's inside the vehicle mounted up on the dash. This makes it so I can control all of these different accessories just by that one little switch panel. I don't have to bring any extra wires in. It's just the one wire that powers this entire unit. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I really like that. So what this enables me to do is all I have to do is run power from each of the accessories into the VO switch. And then what I'm using are, there's a couple of grounds mounted on the inside of the engine compartment right here. And what I have is all the negative leads for my harnesses running back to those. Now for running the engine compartment light, basically what I did was I just ran my harness straight through this structure component of the hood, brought it down, and it just ties off to the washer fluid line. And that runs in to the VO switch. For my A-pillar mounted KC Slimlites along with the C2's, basically what I did was I just ran the harness, and you can see it's right here. And it goes underneath the cowl and comes up through the cowl right here, and that's where both of my harnesses are passing up. And you mirror it on the other side, and the harness that runs for that side just runs right across the main harness that runs across the front wall here. For the KC C2's mounted on the rear bumper, what I did was I ran those guys down the front wall, and you can see right here is where I have all my harness that runs to feed power to the rear. And that guy runs right along the chassis all the way back. And then for my KC Cyclones, what I did was I broke the harness into 2 parts. I did one for the front 3, a second for the rear 6. So basically what's happening here is I have my harness that comes out, puts a T in to run this one, and then it runs down, and you can see that this harness right here is tied on. And that runs to the center forward light up to the other fender. And then similar to the KC C2's that I ran to the rear, I again have the harness running back along the front wall down and along the chassis. Alright guys, so that's going to wrap up the overview of the lighting package that I chose to go with Project Vector for any off-road nighttime wheeling. I hope that you guys enjoyed today's content and got some good value out of it. maybe got some ideas for yourself for how you want to set up the lighting on your vehicle. If you did, guys, please go ahead and hit that like button for me. Go ahead and throw any comments, feedback, or questions in the comments below. As well as, if you haven't already, please subscribe and share this video to help my channel grow. Otherwise, guys, we are VictorVectorJKU. We're taking on this build and the trail, both direction and magnitude. Alright guys, have a good one. Catch you next time.